So as videographers, we all know that there is various different types of video cameras and all different prices. We have your most really expensive video cameras, and then we have more of the cheaper video cameras. And then we have everybody's favorite, the entry level budget-ish type of video cameras. And this video, we're going to talk about the entry level budget-ish video type of video cameras. So quick disclaimer before we get right into today's video, every camera that is on this list, there's only 4 of them, they're all going to be priced under $1,400 ish, all used. Nothing is going to be brand new. If you want to pay brand new, it's going to be more. But if you look in the used market, you can find all these cameras for around $1,200 to $1,400. So it makes it somewhat budget-ish in a way of getting good quality camera. Also, another thing to know, all these cameras that I'm going to mention are going to be either cameras that I personally owned or used, or cameras that I know somebody owns and I was on set with them and I watched them film everything and use the camera as a whole. Camera number 1, ironically, is going to be a cinema camera, and no, it's not going to be the FX6 that I always talk about. It's actually going to be a lot more affordable cinema camera, and it's the Blackmagic Pocket 4K cinema camera. Now, this camera, personally, I have owned and I have used for quite some time. So now, with the Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera, it's priced around, I believe, $1,200 brand new, but you can get them used for a little bit cheaper. I think I bought mine for $1,000 used, and honestly, it looked brand new. With the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera, it is a micro four thirds sensor. It has about 15 stops of dynamic range, and it has, which is amazing, a 5-inch touchscreen display. It is by far, out of all the cameras that I mentioned in this list, it has the best touchscreen because it's just so big. You practically have a monitor on your camera. Now, with the draw side, with the Pocket 4K versus the Pocket 6K, the Pocket 4K, the monitor does not tilt, it doesn't come out, it is a fixed monitor. So it just stays on the back of the camera and you can't really move it, which it is a bummer, especially if you're using like gimbal work, or even if you're using handheld and you wish that you could tilt it, you can't tilt this monitor. It's just fixed on the screen and it doesn't go anywhere. But the Blackmagic Pocket 4K cinema camera, by far, out of every camera that I've used, has the best and the most simplest menu system ever. It is very simple, it is very straight to the point, and you don't have to dive through a humongous menu setting. It has basically everything that you would need for a cinema camera. All the important features that you really need, it has it right there, and it's not going to overcomplicate anything. So now the Blackmagic Pocket 4K cinema camera, it allows you to shoot Blackmagic RAW, or you can shoot in ProRes. Another thing worth mentioning, it also has a dual native ISO of 400 and 3200. It gives you full-size HDMI cables, and then it gives you mini XLR inputs for your audio. Now, I wish the XLR were full-size XLRs, but for a budget cinema camera, I guess this is okay. Now, with the Blackmagic cinema camera, I don't really fully recommend it to someone who's brand new into videography. I recommend it to people who have somewhat of a little bit of experience, but I do recommend it as a great cinema camera if you want to get into the cinema world, especially if you never used a cinema camera before. I think with the Blackmagic, it is a little bit different, and if you never really used a cinema camera, you might find it to be quite frustrating. The Blackmagic workflow itself is different compared to the Canon workflow and compared to the Sony workflow. It's a micro four thirds sensor, so it's not going to be the best in low light situations, so try to avoid situations like that. And if you are in a situation like that, you're gonna have to add more light, just like any other camera, to be honest with you, but especially with a micro four thirds sensor. Okay, so camera number 2 is gonna be the Sony a7 III. Now, this camera, when it came out, was at the prime of its prime. It was the best Sony camera that came out when it came out, and honestly, in this year, I think it still holds its value. I think it still reigns as a great entry-level camera, especially since the price has significantly reduced. I've seen some go for literally $1,100 or even $1,200, same as the Blackmagic. So the a7 III has 24 megapixels, it's a full frame sensor, and it has 5-axis stabilization. It shoots in 4K 30 frames per second. It doesn't shoot 4K 60 frames per second, which can kind of be a bummer to a lot of people, but if you don't really care about that, if you're fine with shooting 1080p 60 frames per second, then you're good on that because it does shoot 1080p 60 frames per second. It has a tilt screen, but it doesn't have the newer Sony screens that flips out. It just tilts up and down. So if you care more about a flippy screen, then the A7 III is probably not going to be the best option for you. But if you don't care about that and you don't mind the tilt, or you even prefer the tilt screen, the A7 III is an amazing option. Now, moving on to number 3, which is personally a camera that I have never used, but I know somebody and I was on set with somebody who filmed with this camera, and it's going to be the Lumix GH5. So now with the Lumix GH5, it is also a micro four thirds sensor. It has 20 megapixels, but it shoots 4K 10-bit 422, just like the A7S III and all the other Sony cameras. And for a hybrid camera, that's really, really good. And for the price point that it is, I believe brand new, it's around $1,400, but I'm sure you can find them cheaper, maybe $1,300, $1,200 in the price range that I'm making all these cameras in. With the GH5, you can record 4K 60 with no time limit, and it has a 5-axis stabilization. So you're getting in-body stabilization with this hybrid camera. Now, moving on to camera number 5, which is another camera that I personally have owned. It's gonna be the Canon EOS R and the RP. Now, the Canon EOS R and the RP, they are both full frame sensor cameras. Now, the EOS R has 30 megapixels and the EOS RP has 26 megapixels. Now, a thing with the Canon EOS RP, which I personally have owned, and I think it was my second camera that I owned. First was a Sony a6000, so it was the second camera that I owned. With the RP, it was a great photography camera. It was okay in video. I think if you're wanting something more for video, go ahead and get the R, for it has a little bit better specs for the video of it. With the RP, the downside of shooting video with that camera is it does have 4K. So if you want 4K, you can shoot 4K, but I don't recommend it because the 4K on that camera, it has a crop, and not just a little crop, it has a big crop. And honestly, the crop is just so bad. It's just, in my opinion and everyone else's opinion who talks about that camera, it's just unusable. Not only that, but when you shoot in 4K on that camera, you lose autofocus. So if you're a videographer who depends highly on autofocus, in 4K, you're going to lose that. But if you record 1080p, you're going to get autofocus and you can get 1080p 60 frames per second, no problem. For the photography side of it, it does take good photos. A lot of my early photos were actually taken on the RP, and I think with its 26 megapixels, it's more than enough, especially if you want to print out your photos. Now the Canon EOS R, it has 30 megapixels, so you get just a little bit more megapixels, but it does go a long way, especially if you're a photographer who likes to make prints. Both cameras are fantastic cameras. The Canon EOS RP, I believe when I bought it brand new, it was $1,200 or it was $1,000. It was around there. I don't really remember, but looking at it now used, I literally found some that are going for around $670. So for $670, if you can pick this camera up, I think it's a great photography camera, and I think it's okay for videos. I wouldn't really, if you're doing heavy video production work, I don't recommend that for videos. But if you're a beginner and you want to make like these little YouTube videos or go out and have like a little travel camera, I think it's good for that. If you don't care about 4K, if you don't care about losing autofocus in 4K, if you don't care about the crop in 4K, you care about just 1080p, 60 frames per second, autofocus, fast, reliable, it's good, then I think that the RP is a great option for you. Now, in my opinion, to conclude all of this, I think if you were to pick up any one of these cameras, I think by far they would all be amazing options. Now, there is plenty of other cameras. There is probably better cameras than the ones that I listed, but these are just the ones that I personally owned, used, or had experience with, and that is why they are on this list. On this channel, I don't talk about anything that I have not used or anything that I don't have any experience or understanding of. Only stuff that I have experience with. So if you found any type of value in this video, please leave it a like, comment, and subscribe. Leave in the comment section below, what is your favorite camera? What is your favorite budget, entry level-ish camera? Leave in the comment section below. Someone's gonna find value in your comment. Let's all help each other out. Without further ado, that's it for today's video. I'm gonna see you in the next one. I'll be on to Buongiorno.